Hey, everybody! Welcome to another edition of What's Your Story? And I am super excited for you guys to be joining me with Alexander, who captured my intrigue the moment we met. He is somebody who does things very differently and yet shows up as love, which immediately resonated with my heart and soul. And so I'm super excited for you guys to learn all about how people can show up differently and still have the same lens of embodying love and stepping into their authenticity. Alexander, take it away. Share with the audience what it is you do.
Yeah, Alexander, you can call me Alex or AM Arktos. It's the stage name I go by. And I produce something called the God Memoirs. It's currently in podcast format. Imagine this sci-fi fantasy story set in a distant galaxy with things like sentient starships, soul harvesting technology. There's action, there's adventure, there's a touch of romance, there's a little tone of comedy in the character's voice, and a spiritual chord to it. Don't beat people over the head with it, but we have fun with it. So that's the main thing I'm probably going to be talking about here right now, but there's other things too. So
Yeah, woo. I love that so much because, well, first off, how did you come up with this Space God Memoirs? Like, how'd you stumble into making this?
Well, I say the basic idea for it has been something kind of going around in my psyche since I've been a child in some form or another. But a big part of it's kind of inspired by the various entertainment I've consumed over the years, like spacey stuff like Star Wars or the Guardians of the Galaxy or comic books. Other parts have been inspired by dreams I've had over the years. I've always been a pretty active dreamer. And, well, a big part of how the character of Kef, the narrator, turned out was inspired by a D&D character I played for years. So there's a lot of sources for that, but I'm going to say like some of the basic idea for the world and the setting being this mix of magic and technology, spirituality and high-tech stuff came about middle school and high school for me as I kind of created some of this world for a role playing game I was working on back then. And then that kind of blossomed into this depiction of my inner world that's popped up, in the podcast
Yeah.
and on the page.
So I'm curious. So for anybody out there who doesn't know, because I didn't know, D&D is Dungeons and Dragons, right?
Yes.
I could be wrong, but have you always, I guess the question would be, have you always been confident with yourself enough to just do the thing that felt right for you?
Oh, no way. Not at all. I mean, honestly, I've had confidence struggles for a good portion of my life. And, probably for years, I led a pretty quiet existence, and developed Space God and other fantastical concepts as part of a rich inner world, but I seldom shared that inner world with others. And though I think I first started to get more comfortable sharing this inner stuff with others through D&D or Dungeons and Dragons and other role-playing games where I would gravitate towards the role of the dungeon master where you'd present the world to people, you'd do silly voices and accents for the other characters everybody would meet, and you would tell a shared story. But even then, like, I was comfortable there sharing it with a small group, and I'd say doing stuff like improv at the Second City, at other local theaters, got me in a headspace to be able to share that with more people and be comfortable doing that with more people. And, you know, getting involved in the spiritual community in different metaphysical groups and got me more comfortable in expressing that in different ways and in sharing with different people and maybe merging those parts of myself, that
Yeah.
creative part, that spiritual part, that part of me that loves to be a showman, but was maybe suppressed for much of my youth because, never developed that kind of confidence before. But
Yeah. I so you would say this stage helped you step into that confidence? So you didn't share openly with people that you played Dungeons or Dragons or anything?
well, I mean, I would share during the game with them,
Yeah, yeah.
but
So I guess
I'll tell them about my ideas.
I just know a lot of people who even like uh they a lot of people hide what they enjoy doing, particularly as a young adult and a child, because school kids and stuff bully them. So I'm just
Yeah.
trying to understand like the lens in which you showed up, where you kind of just played reserve and small, and then as you stepped into your confidence through theater and improv, you were able to feel confident enough to step out in the light without being afraid of being judged.
Yeah, and that's the gist of it. And in truth, it's been a gradual process. It hasn't been all at once kind of thing. You know, even through college and much of my 20s, I was probably the quiet guy sometimes, at least in general group conversations. The guy that kind of hung out in the background, occasionally said something weird and quirky, then kind of receded back into the background. But I think I came to realize over the years that that wasn't really me. That was just this conditioned behavior that I'd gotten used to, that was comfortable, and needed to step out of that. And I think doing things like improv, learning voice acting, and obviously the D and all that has kind of gotten me into this place where I'm comfortable having the spotlight more. But in truth, it's probably always something I wanted. It's just like didn't know how to go about it, didn't know how to be comfortable with it, but sometimes you got to force yourself to do that uncomfortable stuff to grow.
I totally agree. I think that our strength lies within the discomfort, because you learn who you are within that mess rather than just playing small, or rather being afraid to, you know, be judged by people because how you show up is contrary to what they know and feel safe within. So you alluded to the fact that you kind of layer in a bit of spirituality within the space God Memoirs. Can you talk to me about whether you've always been spiritual?
Yeah, my spirituality, I think to a degree, it's been there since I've been a small child. And I admit, when I was a little kid, some of my first memories, maybe about 2 years old or so, were experiencing things like it seemed like I was floating above my bed or being it felt dragged out of my body. It's what some people would describe as an out of body experience. Whether you're open to that or not, if not, just say it's like a fairly vivid dream state. And I was experiencing all these things throughout childhood. And this kind of got me curious about like paranormal kind of things, about what I was experiencing. And over the years I started studying different methods of inducing out of body experiences or having lucid dreams. And this led to me studying all manner of spiritual stuff, starting early in my preteen years into my teen years, things like occultism and magic, stuff like meditation, yoga, energy work, tai chi, qigong. And though admittedly a lot of my main focus on the spirituality has been through the realms of dreams and delving into the subconscious realm. So yeah, that has been a big influence on me over the years. And I think what I've acquired through all these different experiences and studies has been a spirituality that's open, that's fluid, and it's open to change. Is I don't like to have a very structured set of beliefs. To me, beliefs and ideas about particularly metaphysical stuff, that can be in flux. That's useful to because ultimately we don't know what the truth is. Even if we see something, even if we have a vision, well, we don't know that that's true. That could just be our mind messing with us. So I like to be open to all possibilities in spirituality, but not attached to any one system or belief.
I really align and appreciate that lens because I think that in our human experience, each moment is a gift to us. And if we're open to whatever the unfolding is, how we view anything has the opportunity, a propensity to shift and change based on what is unfolding for us in that moment. So what prompted you to create Space God Memoirs, coming from a place of obviously science fiction, but interweaving spirituality within that?
Well, I'd say for a good portion of my adult life, I've been working on different writings, both kind of fantasy and science fiction, and it's a place I'm comfortable with, that I'm comfortable telling stories about, that it's easy for me to connect and go into that creative, expressive place in that realm of sci-fi and fantasy. And what prompted me to do it initially is right before I kind of started working on Space Guide, I had already done, a lot of improv. I've done stage stuff. I had voiceover training, and then I got this idea to create a new creative work because I had some interesting dreams involving the character Kef, the narrator of the Space God Memoirs, and there was already kind of a prototypical version of him in my mind already, kind of inspired by this D&D character I played, plus these other dreams I had kind of had involving him. If you don't know Kef, picture him as kind of this roguish, jokey kind of guy who doesn't take himself too seriously most of the time and might come off as a bit of a scoundrel and scumbag, but also is kind of self aware about it and becomes more self aware about it through the stories, where he does know that he's a bit deeper than that surface persona and that he's more than what he seems to be on the surface. So visually, he's definitely an alien. Like, picture him with this kind of a deep gray skin to him. He's kind of a lean, lanky guy, big head of bushy black hair that looks sort of red in the right light. And as the series goes on, of course, he changes a little bit. Starting season 2, he'll have horns, and in season 3, he'll have more different features because genetic modification technology and all that. But yeah, I had dreams about him, and then I had these other dreams that hinted that I should create this new work. So I'm like, yeah, okay, let's do it. Let's create this whole sci-fi fantasy epic from this character's point of view. And I made a lot of the inspirations from it come from some of the weird woo-woo ancient alien stuff I studied, ancient astronaut theories, you know, stuff like fringe science and pseudoscience and metaphysics, all that's kind of thrown into there in the background. And I feel science fiction is the best way to express it, you know.
I think it's so beautiful that you had this like dream, this prototype, and then you said yes. Because
Yeah.
so often, particularly in the space that I work, a lot of people have these inspired ideas, these wonderful, what I believe is creative insights that they then tell themselves no, right? They allow either fear or some belief to prevent them from doing the thing that comes to them. Have you ever been challenged with saying no to things that you were called to do? Or have you always been somebody who kind of leans into the gray and figures it out?
A bit of both. I mean, truthfully, I didn't spend most of my life as this go-getter who says yes to everything. You know, I'll say this, I struggle with imposter syndrome as much or more than other people, and a bit less now. And since I've done a lot of meditations, I've observed a lot of this stuff, I've been able to process through a lot of it and, dissolve it, move on through it, learn from it. But no, like I said, in the past, I was often what seemed to be the shy guy in the room who didn't go for his ideas, who settled for, jobs that didn't suit his talents, who settled for lesser things, who didn't always express himself. No, I have grown a lot over the years into what I am right now, and I'm still growing.
Do you think that AM Arktos is the evolution and part of Alexander, or do you think it's a bit of both? Because I think about Beyonce is just somebody I can think about where
Mhm.
when she was not confident and she felt like she had imposter syndrome, she came up with Sasha Fierce. And over the
Mm.
course of her career, she feels like they merged. So I'm curious if part of your character either lends to you learning to say yes more and break free from that imposter syndrome, or if it's kind of compartmentalized.
Yeah, what you're saying reminds me of the whole idea. I've heard this advice given by some people to create an alter ego for yourself. And yes, AM Arktos, that's not my birth name. It's an alter ego. And according to some people, an alter ego can help you step into more kind of confident or empowered version of yourself. And, others might say that's being a phony, but really, I'd say like every face we put on for others is artificial. Whatever personality we're playing, however genuine we're being, there is a degree of that's not really the full expression of ourselves there. The way I view it, the full self is something that's beyond a name or an identity. It's something that can't really be fully expressed in words. So why not step forward and be the best version of myself that I can be? And it's pretend, but to me, honestly, it's all pretend.
Well, yeah, I mean, you and me could go on for days about that. I think
Yeah.
that, and I agree. I think that there is such a gift in being able to pretend you're somebody different until you evolve into that strength or that courage or whatever persona you were pretending to be. That's the power of our imagination. Then it allows us to feel into what we wouldn't experience as Kerry or Alexander, right?
Yeah.
And then going further, then to decide whether that's a feeling we want to even cultivate further or not. So I think it's a beautiful way to express yourself and also work on the limiting beliefs that we've all been conditioned to have and break free from them.
Yeah, and it's not that I can't be who I was born as or I can't be Alexander. I'm just realizing that there's more to me than that.
Yeah.
And I say fiction and creating fictional characters, they can be just as real as anything. They just help you to express different parts of yourself that, like you're saying, don't normally show up in your day to day life. And if you're going into the real spiritual depths of things, you'd say that, well, yeah, like we said, the real self is beyond expression and we have infinite aspects to ourselves. So why can't we pick and choose which one we want to express?
So beautifully put. And here's the thing, right? Think about Napoleon Hill, one of the leaders that most of the top one percenters of Fortune 500 companies have read. He talks about using the imagination to imagine yourself into success. So I 100% believe that the power of our imagination and willing to experience the reality that feels right for us. It doesn't have to make sense for you, but it has to make sense for me. That is where our power lies. And I also think that, and something I respect and admire so much about you, AM Arktos, is that you showing up in all of that expression gives other people permission to do the same.
Hmm. Good stuff. Yeah, I mean, I try to express plenty of my stuff. There's
Yeah.
stuff I don't express, but maybe eventually I will.
You never.
And and in fact, that whole idea of identity and how you express yourself, that reminds me of some of the main themes of the Space God Memoirs that are kind of underlying it. With every season, I begin with the line, "Who am I?" As it's kind of about like the narrator trying to figure out who he is, and that doesn't just include his like day-to-day life. That is like there's past life memories he's trying to integrate, past selves he's trying to figure out who he was in some ancient reality and distant times. And it reminds me of some of the first lines of the first season where he's like, names come and go. Realities fade along with the bodies that wore them, losing all meaning as they dissolve into the depths of time and space. I could start at the beginning, but I'm not even sure there is a beginning. For the way things work is just cycle upon cycle, each one leading into the next, and all of it, whatever. Uh, that's kind of,
So
but then,
deep. It's so deep right there because I
yeah.
totally get it. I'm curious. How do you get into the creative space to come up with the content for obviously Space God Memoirs, but even previous endeavors that you've undertaken?
Well, a lot of it's kind of training yourself to be in that creative space, and eventually you're going to be in it all the time. I could look across the room and see some like a vase, for example, on the shelf, and then I'm imagining that pattern of the vase is like the surface of an alien planet, and then I could imagine what kind of societies would be on that alien planet, what kind of characters might grow out of them. And I find that, like, if you're in a receptive place, as I often am, you can have ideas throughout the day. You just got to kind of write down those ideas, that, whether they're from your waking life or your dreams. There's
Yep.
good ideas in dreams too. And then just go in there, go into that flow state and see what comes. Like, it might be dumb ideas initially, and that's fine. Put them down anyway. You don't have to publish them or anything, and just accept whatever comes. And then afterwards, I can put that into a coherent setting, a coherent narrative. But the initial ideas, they can be crazy and chaotic and not make any sense. And then you could work with the different parts of your mind to forge them into something that makes sense to other people later.
So you shared that, you shared with the audience to go into the flow state. So do you have a specific ritual or routine that you do to get into flow prior to creating an episode? And a second question after that, when you start a season, do you know how the season's going to end, or does it kind of unfold as you're just creating each episode?
Yeah, usually I start at the big picture and then I start to narrow it down to the individual episodes. So usually I'll start with how I want the season to go. And often that'll be like me even writing the ending first and then creating that sequence of events that could lead up to it. But I have also in my mind a whole idea of not just how a season will go, but how the whole series will go, where our narrator will end up at the end of like season 7 or season 9 or something like that. And the overall story I want to tell. And then a big part of it is how to get there. And sometimes speaking of getting in that flow state, sometimes, might be good to start with some breathing exercises or do a little meditation to just clear your mind. But sometimes I just sit down at the keyboard and I start typing things and see where that goes. And, you know, often I'll get ideas for something that would be cool to have in a scene, or whatever that may be, whether it's a character that shows up, or a setting for the scene, or some kind of action, and then I can write that down, and then I can choose where to integrate that in the story later. It can be a separate process. I don't always write like start to finish.
Gotcha. Okay. Is
different for
there
everyone.
is there key takeaways or a specific feeling that you work to cultivate within your listening audience while they're moving through Kef's life, figuring out who he is?
Yeah, the specific feelings will vary according to the episode and scene, of course. Like there's moments where he's angry, he's miserable, he's lonely, he's frustrated, whatever. And then there's moments he's experiencing ecstasy and passion and empowerment. But overall, like, it's a pretty varied story, but overall we're kind of drawn along with him as he goes on this process of, yes, self-discovery and finding out who he is. And my idea would be for have to have the audience maybe get spurred on by that to looking at themselves, their own lives, and seeing who they are. And yeah. Meanwhile, there's plenty of action and adventure. This high kind of concept stuff is only a small part of the story on the page or in the episodes themselves. Like, there's a lot of exploring weird alien environments. There's a lot of chases. There's some fights. There's a bit of romance. There's all sorts of this cool stuff going on, and I like to put the deep concepts kind of in the background, and occasionally they'll pop up and they'll surface and they'll be open. But I think it's best if people kind of figure out all that for themselves based on the hints I give, and then instead of beating them over the head with it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's super subtle, but
Mm.
it's as my friend Jojo Lorikia would say, edutainment, meaning there are
Yeah.
nuances of planting seeds or encouraging the listening audience through Kef's journey to ponder something maybe greater or more deeply, but through really entertaining them and keeping them engaged through his experience and how he's unfolding into his unique self in each episode.
Yeah, ultimately, it's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be enjoyable and immersive.
Mm.
And if it isn't that, like whatever lessons you try to include are probably going to be skipped over by most people because it's annoying to really try to teach people things if they don't want to be taught. So just
Absolutely.
like get in the zone, get into the character, and learn alongside them.
So, this ties into AM Arktos. How do you incorporate fun in your regular daily rhythms outside of creating this exceptional podcast?
Oh, wow. My daily rhythms. And if you're talking about like various things, I like to have fun with my existence for the most part. I haven't always been the most fun person, but that side of me has always been there. And like right now, if you look at my Instagram, at AM Arktos is one word, I'll share it later. I post stuff like energy drink reviews, and I'll post a little bit of spiritual videos too, but you know, myself wearing silly costumes, whatever I can come up with. I try to do a weekly costume nowadays, and even just like, hanging out with people or cooking dinner, you can come up with silly little songs to sing to yourself, or rhymes. I like to practice making up parody songs or doing rhyming just in my day-to-day life, like rap, making up fake raps or songs involving stuff. It just keeps the mind fresh and keeps the thoughts flowing. And entertainment wise, yeah, I still like to have fun. I still like to, do things like improv sometimes, play D&D plenty, do karaoke when I can,
Too bad
whatever
we
else.
don't live close. I would be totally down with that.
Yeah, I know. Sadly, we live multiple states away.
I know. So was there a pivotal moment in your life that you decided that you were going to incorporate more fun into your experience, or was that kind of a slow integration as well?
Well, if there is a pivotal moment, like I'd say back in around 2020, 2021, you know, I was having a relationship that was falling apart. It was a very powerful relationship, very energetic, very passionate, but it was also really toxic. And I was miserable and frustrated most of the time. And in the wake of that relationship ending, which happened around the same time as the whole pandemic stuff, uh, I really decided to go back and reconnect with my spirituality, reconnect my social life, and have some fun again. Because at that point, I didn't have many active groups of friends. There wasn't a lot going on in my life. And since then, I decided, like, I need to step this up, enjoy existence more, have some fun, live, love, play. And yeah, I admit, since that time, things have been pretty busy, and I've had to adjust to the increased busyness of having different social groups and, people who want my attention. But it's better than that kind of place of being a miserable, frustrated hermit that I
Mhm.
was starting to delve into before.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious because quite often breakups lead people down a path of depression and, kind of just sadness. Have you always been resilient in that when you faced, a challenge? I know you didn't always have self-worth, but have you always had like the tenacity to like go through that challenge instead of running away from it or, you know, sitting in the misery of the pain of it?
Well, nah, I don't. I mean, I have enough tenacity that I'm here right now talking to
Yeah.
you. But no, I've gone through periods where I was probably in a very dark, depressed place, and I felt a lot of that, the pain of being what maybe spiritual people would call in the void, where it doesn't seem like anything has any worth or meaning, and it doesn't feel like you're going to be out of that anytime ever when you're
Yeah.
in it. And I know when you're in that negative headspace, that negative stuff can feed itself, and it can start to grow and grow and snowball if you let it. And no, I mean, honestly, I think I've spent various years of my life being not the happiest person. And I think I've learned a lot from there. I've learned a lot about like going inward and examining myself there, even especially the parts that maybe I wouldn't like so much, and examining life, examining my beliefs. Admittedly, that breakup made me question a lot of my beliefs on reality and spirituality and all that stuff too,
Yeah.
because you know there was a lot of intense metaphysical stuff with that relationship as well.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go into details about that, but yeah. And admittedly, I spent some years being in a isolated, lonely headspace, but in some ways you could liken that to the ancient heroes of mythology venturing down into the dark underworld to find something valuable. And yeah, the underworld isn't such a nice place, but there's stuff you need down there. And ultimately, maybe what you need in the underworld is that missing part of yourself, or what you thought was that missing part of yourself. And regarding relationships, you're probably not going to find that missing part of yourself among other people. You can have lovely, good relationships, but yeah, sometimes you got to go through that underworld of the soul to find that within yourself.
Mm.
And
Do
the
you think
details of
that
that's hard.
your ability to have a really wonderful imagination and at such a young age to have been so connected with something greater than yourself helped you move out of those dark, challenging times in your life?
Oh, for sure. For sure. If I couldn't imagine something better, I wouldn't be striving towards it.
Yeah.
You know, truthfully, I've had a lot of what people might call metaphysical experiences and visionary states.
Hey, Red Heart.
Go
Uh,
ahead.
Something
Sorry.
going on? Okay, no
Yep, you
problem.
go. I'm just recording this. You're good.
Yeah, and over time, those have helped me get a different perspective on things. To not regard anything as absolute, even my own thoughts and my own ideas about myself. And I think I needed that more fluid, flexible perspective in order to get past some of the bullshit. Because I think I realized up in a part of myself that even when I was experiencing the deepest, most miserable depression, that it was kind of bullshit. That none of that stuff was really real,
Yeah.
and that was just the ego mind doing its stuff, and that was not the whole of me. And so
Mm.
I had to step past all that stuff, and admittedly, I am an ambitious person as well, probably because of those things, and I couldn't ever just be content leading a life I felt was mediocre or not quite as happy as it could be. So I had to push through that. And it wasn't even an option. I don't think I could ever settle or be in this settled place, especially not in a sad place.
Yeah, I agree. It's so I'm highly ambitious as well in many ways, and despite angst and suffering, I there was no way I was going to settle to in that space of existence. I would claw my way out every time. I don't know that I used imagination the way you did, and so I think it's such a profound gift that you have to have been able to tap into your imagination, for much of your life and to lean into that play and that curiosity and things of that nature. I'm curious. So you have a good following on Instagram and you shared with the audience that, your life is admittedly more busy. How do you make time for Alexander or AM Arktos to continue to go within and nurture that internal self discovery and curiosity amidst all of the demands or the priorities that are now, being asked of you?
Well, I admit I'm still learning and still adjusting to all that. Hey, sometimes I do feel a bit overwhelmed, but yeah, I think unless someone is like so super busy that they don't even have like 5 minutes, I think you could make time for like meditation, a bit of ceremony. I try to make some time in the evening for that, and whether it's sitting in front of your fireplace or outside watching the sunset, you can find some moments for that. And if you're so busy you don't have time for even that, maybe it's time to rethink your priorities. And but yeah, I'd
Oh,
still
that's
try
so
to.
beautiful. Yeah. I
The
mean, you're
most,
spot on in that. But I also think, from my perspective, that most people are addicted to overthinking, and a lot of their overthinking leads them to believe they don't have time when really it's just examining how they spend their current time to find that moment of peace, that moment
oh
of rest.
yeah, like some
Yeah,
people act like they don't have a lot of time, but then a lot of the time is just spent like scrolling through social media, like doom scrolling for hours.
all the time, and then you wonder why you're like struggling. I tell people all the time, they're like, Carrie, I have anxiety. I'm like, well, what do you watch it for TV? And the things they tell me, I'm like, oh my
Yeah,
god.
the news probably or something.
Yeah. Or I mean, well, think about it. The state of humanity is reflective in TV. And what's the most popular stuff on TV? Crime shows.
Yeah, I've never been too big on crime shows. I liked Breaking Bad, but that's about the only crime show I really watched.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I always try to find time for me because someone might say that's selfish, but it's a needfully selfish thing to find time for yourself.
Yeah.
And I was gonna say something else about that. Yeah, finding your time. I don't recall what I was going to say about that though. We kind of
Well,
lost that train of thought.
so I'm curious, with a couple minutes to go,
Hmm.
what's an impact or something that you want to share with the listening audience that maybe has a profound influence on how you have now been able to show up in more confidence and more vulnerability? Because the reality is you don't show up in characters on Instagram or create this podcast without, having to be vulnerable, because you're risking rejection, right? What's something that you would like to impart on the listening audience that you think could benefit them or be paused to consider?
I'll say this, that what I write and create and voice may be fiction, but ultimately, maybe I've come to realize that all of it's fiction. All these acts we put on, uh, no matter what self we're expressing, none of it really is real. All of it's just this human act, and we try to pretend we have this ego, this personality. And at the end of the day, at the end of a lifetime, everyone's probably gonna die anyway. And whether you believe in an afterlife or not, that existence has ended. And if it all come to an end, if all the nature of physical things is temporary, then in some ways it's just a game. It's just like a play on stage, just an illusion, just a dream, whatever. And so, what do you do with the game? You have fun with it. You go there, and you're not actually risking anything by putting yourself out there. You're not risking anything by exposing your vulnerabilities, because ultimately, in the physical sense, you ain't gonna live forever anyway, unless you find the immortality serum. So you're probably gonna regret more what you didn't do than what you did do.
I love that. So, what is up next for AM Arktos or Alexander? What illusionary things do you have in store for yourself in the unfolding of the now?
Well, I'd say Space God Memoirs Season 3 is just on the horizon right now. The whole thing's been recorded and edited, and we're in the process of mixing together all the different original musical tracks by our great musicians, Alpha Colors. And picture this kind of synth wavy, kind of electronic soundtrack that evokes cool things like outer space and adventure and all this cool stuff. We're composing that. I think by the end of the year, season 3 will have launched. And meanwhile, yes, I am working on other projects. There's a kind of a more low, dark fantasy setting who I definitely want to create uh, probably novels with. And I'm going to be creating that. Of course, I'm in the process of moving, selling the home, and all that, and restructuring some career stuff. So that might take a bit of precedence, but the creative stuff will still be out there. And as usual, still going inward, still dreaming, still meditating, still doing some ceremony, and having a beautiful time.
Woo!
Everybody.
What a gift. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank
I
you, Terry.
am in deep gratitude, and I truly, you are inspired because you inspire others to show up as themselves, and to me,
Good.
that is the most profound gift we can give to the world. For any of the listening audience, I will certainly have AM Arktos, also known as Alexander's, information in the show notes. Follow him, check out Space God Odysseys. Let him know what you guys think. And until next time, as I always say, remember to laugh often, because to his point, life is not that serious. Mwah.